this. 2 years ago, we opened up against Arkansas Pine Bluff, went 63-7. And I know with the team we're facing against this weekend here, Arkansas just went ahead and faced Arkansas Pine Bluff, and they held them scoreless, and they scored 70. But what are you guys thinking about, from seeing Arkansas week one, or just looking through maybe some stats here as well too? Because I know we're fresh off the last game.
Cody, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm still trying to get past South Dakota State just because it's Monday. It's kind of when I start moving on. But I tried to flip over to that game, even though it was a blowout, and I knew it would be because it was Pine Bluff. Between that and obviously the Colorado game was a lot more entertaining, and we actually now this team's relevant to us even more. And so I tried to watch them as much. I'm not trying to put too much stock into the shutout, but I do think it'll be one of the better defenses that OSU sees this season. From what I saw, just based on what I saw from the Big 12, I was texting a friend who actually is a Texas Tech graduate saying, like, it looks like the Big 12 is back to, like, the shootout days, because here they are giving up 50-something points to Abilene Christian. And the fact that Arkansas is from the SEC. I know people hate hearing the SEC, especially in your Big 12. But they're going to have a strong defense. They're going to rely on that. So I do think it's going to be one of the better defenses. I'm not saying the best. Utah, K-State, they're going to have good defenses as well. But the fact you shut out any team, again, OSU could play Pine Bluff. We've talked about their issues with giving up big plays. No matter who, they're probably going to blow some kind of coverage and give up a big play, and at least give up that leads to a field goal or give up a big touchdown. So shutting out anyone in today's college football world is impressive. I was also really impressed with the quarterback. I think Taylon Green, he's a transfer from Boise State. He got some playing time, 3 years, I believe, there. Threw 2 touchdowns, but he also ran for 2 touchdowns. And what he did in the pocket, and if there's anything OSU fans that makes them kind of shiver, is quarterbacks that can run. We've seen what they can do to Oklahoma State, which Marshall already mentioned. They did well this past week, but I think Taylon Green's a lot quicker, got a lot more talent than even Ganowski. All right,
good try.
But he was the one where I'm more concerned for OSU going in now than I was before I watched that game, and he was a big reason, because I was like, man, this kid can play. I mean, he looked really good, and I don't think Pine Bluff, I'm not saying they're a good team, but I don't think they're as bad as he made them look, because he made some really, really good plays and looked really good.
Yeah, I was impressed. I kept their game on. What was the big game that night?
Colorado.
Yeah, I kept that game on until the Colorado game popped up, and then I was like, all right, I'm switching over to this. But it's hard to. I was impressed. Obviously they go take care of business. Winning 70-0 is not an easy feat. I don't really care who you're playing, but I don't know how much you can take away from it. Pine Bluff was 2-9 last year as an FCS team. In Oklahoma, we probably keep up with Tulsa a little bit. Tulsa, who maybe wasn't an incredible team last season, beat that team 42-7. So, I don't know what you can necessarily gain from that. Pine Bluff's 2 wins last year were each by a point. I'm just not sure how good Pine Bluff is, just to really give a firm barometer. But yeah, I was impressed. You mentioned Green, the quarterback. I thought he looked very good. Dual threat, runs for 88 yards as well. I was impressed that they, that the Razorbacks handled business. I'm just not sure how much I can really take from it right now, just because of Arkansas Pine Bluff. I don't think is, that good of a team.
It does seem like that the 9-point favorite for OSU seems probably about right for me. When I saw that, I was like, that seems about right. Touchdown, field goal, which is less than that. But, 10 points, I could see them going by 10 points if you take OSU in that. But that seems about right for me. I think I saw enough out of the quarterback to know it's not going to be a blowout, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I would hope for a blowout against an SEC team, but you can never count those to happen necessarily. I also want to ask you guys here, how do you think Arkansas ranks against kind of maybe the rest of the SEC, but really against the other teams we'll play against this season? Do you think they're kind of up there with the Utah and K-State and good previews for that, or are they kind of with the I don't want to say Arizona State, or are they kind of in between at West Virginia?
Yeah, I think the Big 12 is you've got, I think, the 3, which are Oklahoma State, Utah, Kansas State. Then you've got a soup of sorts of just about every other team. Your Kansases, your West Virginias, your Arizonas. Arizona looked really, or that receiver anyways looked really good. I think Arizona struggled a little bit, but who else is in that? I think UCF's probably in that. I think that Arkansas's probably, if they were to join the Big 12 here in the middle of the season, I think they'd kind of be in that soup of teams. I could see them contending, in the Big 12 a little bit, but I think it'd more likely be they'd be somewhere in that group of teams, those West Virginias, those UCFs, kind of that group to Kansas. So yeah, I was impressed. Iowa State, and let's throw out all the Big 12 teams that I know at this point. So yeah, I don't think that they'd be picked among those tops. I don't think they'd be a Utah and Oklahoma State or Kansas State. But I do think that they would garner some respect in the Big 12 just based on the athletes that they have and how good that quarterback looked the other night.
I would compare them most to Kansas State just because they have a dangerous quarterback and a solid defense. I don't think they're as good as Kansas State, nor do I think Utah's better than Kansas State. So I would agree with Marshall. They'll probably give West Virginia a run for their money. I would take Kansas. If I was a betting man, I would take Kansas over them. So yeah, I would agree. They're probably a middle-of-the-road type Big 12 team.
Gotcha. Well, we'll also hear, I don't know if you guys may have seen it or not, because they showed it a couple times during the broadcast, but they have Kansas winning the Big 12 percentage-wise from the ESPN predictor. And then Oklahoma State is somewhere down there, but we're all the way down there with Utah, which seems wild at like 98%. Do you think that's more of just Kansas' schedule where the toughest team they play is K-State and they don't really play anyone else, or is there more to it here?
I think it is rather interesting kind of looking at the schedules. My prediction's already not looking great. I picked West Virginia to join Oklahoma State in the Big 12 title game. West Virginia did not look very good the other day. So, I think it's probably, whenever you get into those types of, calculations, really, I think it is, especially at this point in the year, very schedule dependent. But I think the Big 12 is so up for grabs this year in a way that you're not totally, you think this team's going to be pretty good, but you're not totally sure how good. So yeah, I think that'd probably just be down to the schedule because they, Kansas, similarly to Arkansas, beat Lindenwood. So it's like, what am I supposed to take from that? I have no idea.
Which I had Kansas in the title game against OSU. And a big part of it, though, was, one, they are kind of like OSU, and they return a lot of talent. They get Jalen Daniels back. Devin O'Neal, that's his last name, their running back, who's really
Just
good.
O'Neal.
Sorry, O'Neal. There's an OU quarterback named O'Neal. Devin Neal, and the fact their schedule. I mean, they don't play OSU. They wouldn't see OSU until the Big 12 title game. So, yeah, I could see them up there. I also don't know what all goes in that percentages because I've looked at some of them, and some of them don't make sense, and then some of it you understand. I think a lot of it would play into the fact that they have enough talent to cruise through should have enough talent to cruise through that schedule that they were given.
Gotcha. Well, Dekota, I know you just wrote a new Big 12 update here. Wanted to ask you what your thoughts were from kind of the rest of the Big 12 here this past weekend, and any big takeaways here. I know we talked about Texas Tech, and I kind of made fun of their opponent here briefly, but want to ask you about the rest of the teams here from this past weekend, and was there any big other takeaways here from the Big 12 schedule week one?
I mean, it's only week one. I wasn't too impressed just by the fact of Arizona. You look at their score, like Marshall mentioned, but they didn't look as good. They started out slow. Finally, they just had more talent. You look at what Texas Tech did. We mentioned in the preseason, you never know what you're going to get from Tech. They think every year they got the hype. Is this year going to finally be the year where they're contending for a Big 12 title, or they're a losing record in the conference? And this year it looks like, Alan Bowman, Kansas, Utah, Kansas State. If you're giving up 50-something points, Abilene Christian, those teams are going to put up a lot of points. Ollie Gordon might run for 1 million yards against them when Alan Bowman might throw for 1 million. And so I thought Colorado still looked good. I thought they looked solid. I think Shedeur Sanders is as advertised. Travis Hunter is as advertised. Again, you never know if the wheels are going to fall off at any point with that team, though. But I think they're still a dangerous team. I think that's still I think North Dakota State is kind of like what OSU got out of South Dakota State. Not quite a normal FCS opponent where you can tell a little bit more. But I do think that will be a dangerous game for OSU. The fact they have to go to Boulder, It's a Friday night, Black Friday game. They could be fighting for bowl eligibility. They could be, there's no telling. And Marshall even mentioned they could just be so bad. Sanders and Hunter could just be on the sidelines and say, nope, we're just going to the NFL at this point. You never know what you're going to get from the Buffaloes at that point. So I don't know how telling it was week one, because a lot of them were playing. I think West Virginia was the only team that had by far the toughest challenge, and they kind of got handled for the most part.
Yeah, well, Marshall, I also want to ask you from your 10 thoughts here from the past weekend. You talked about two defensive guys that were not making household names here, and Corey Black and oh gosh, I was just on here, and Trey Rucker. So, want to ask you, because they're not Colin Oliver, they're not Nick Martin, not even Kendall Daniels. So, what do you think about their play from the past weekend as well?
Yeah, Corey Black has been playing forever, it seems, at this point. It seems like he's been one of Oklahoma State's cornerbacks. He was the duo with Jabbar Muhammad, who Jabbar was at Washington last year, is now at Oregon. So, like, Jabbar's moved twice, and Corey's still here playing football. But, that second drive, Corey makes a beautiful play on an interception. Last year, teams were not throwing near Corey very often. And I thought it had something to do with as much experience and as good as Corey is. And then it also had to do with, the guys on the other side, Cam Smith, Cale Smith, were very inexperienced at that point. So I was like, I don't know if it's just teams really dislike throwing it to Corey Black, or if they're just trying to, pick on these young guys. Then he gets to pick on pretty much the first attempt, that the first ball he gets thrown his way. I'm like, it's obviously a joke, but it might have been better for Corey just to knock that ball down, because now nobody's going to want to throw at him the rest of the year. So yeah, I thought that was really good. He did give up a touchdown while playing in the slot later in the game. He said, being in the slot, something that he's going to need to work on. But if he can just take down a outside receiver, that's going to be huge for Oklahoma State going forward. And then Trey Rucker, I didn't realize that Trey Rucker had 15 tackles until I was sitting in the Gundy presser, and I just like scanning over the stats. I was like, holy crap, Trey Rucker had 15 tackles. He had 100 last year. And I feel like for a guy who had 100 tackles last year, really nobody was talking about Trey going into the season, just because you've got Nick Martin. You've got Colin Oliver, who's, they're talking about putting him on the edge a little bit more. You've got Kendall Daniels, who they're talking about moving to linebacker. Even discussions of Lyric Rawls coming back from injury and things like that. So I thought Trey kind of got lost in the shuffle for a guy who had 100 tackles last season. He gets 15 in his first game. I think I did the math, and it's probably simple math because it's just 15 times 12, but it was like 180. So could you imagine 180 tackles? I don't think that's not going to happen. But yeah, I thought he was really good, especially for the rest of that secondary, a little young. You've got Cam Epps, who's just in his second year of actually kind of playing. Dylan Smith is a true sophomore. Lyric Rawls is coming back from injury. And then with Kendall Daniels now, playing closer to the line of scrimmage at linebacker, I think that, this is kind of, Trey needs to kind of take over, kind of needs to be that leader for the back end of that defense. So, yeah, I thought it was a really good game one from Trey. And then Corey, I think Corey is always that good. It's just you don't always realize him because he's just not getting thrown at, because it's like, why would they try that? So, yeah, I thought those two guys in particular had a really good day.
Gotcha. Well, I also want to ask both of you guys here. I know you spent some time simulating the Oklahoma State's football season here 100 times, and here's all what happened to your great article there as well too, and write up about really simulating the whole video game. I know the Jackrabbits are not in college football 25 here, but what were your takeaways kind of on simulating out the whole season? Anything that stuck out to you?
So it shouldn't mean anything. So I tried to write that in the opening paragraph, like, hey, no, please nobody get mad at this. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. The game, anyways, thinks those last two games against Texas Tech and Colorado, the last two games of the regular season, are going to be a little tough. Oklahoma State won 59% of the time against Tech and 58% of the time against Colorado. Obviously, we know the hype that comes around Colorado, so I imagine that had something to do with that. The game, very high on Utah. They won 32 of the 100 Big 12 titles. But yeah, nothing too crazy. All in good fun. Oklahoma State did win 2 natties during that exercise, but Appalachian State also won a natty. So, like, again, everything should be taken with a whole can of salt instead of a grain. But yeah, it was a fun exercise to do after it was over. The grind of it, simming that thing 100 times. I do not wish to ever do that again.
Until next year for college football.
Yeah, if it happens next year, I'm going to do like 5 simulations a day instead of like the 25 that I was forcing myself to do at the very last moment.
Well, any predictions as it comes up this weekend? I mean, Arkansas SEC team, we just talked about them at length here as well, too. But do you think we cover the spread? Do you want to give a score prediction? And if not, totally get that, too.
I think I haven't, kind of like Dekota said, I haven't dove too deep into Arkansas yet, but I think Oklahoma State wins the game. I think it's maybe similar, a little bit tighter than that Arkansas game. Similar in that, I think that, South Dakota State had some chances. We mentioned that 4th down play in the first drive. You mentioned all the yardage total being closer. So I think the score is going to be closer, but I think the game's kind of going to look similar to that. I have the right to change this at a later date, but I'd say something about like 31-24-ish, I think is where I'm leaning right now. But yeah, I think it's a game that's a little tighter, obviously playing an SEC opponent, and they've got some good athletes. But I do think that Oklahoma State comes out on top, fairly comfortably. I don't think it's too sweaty towards the end of the game.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't. Again, it's hard because I haven't looked too much into them other than just them playing air almost on Thursday night. Going into, like, if you had asked me this time last week, I thought OSU would have more issue with South Dakota State than they would Arkansas. But just seeing, you kind of saw the pieces out. South Dakota State had lost. I think I overhyped that quarterback a lot in my head. I thought he was going to come out and be like, I don't know, like a Big 12 quarterback or something. And so seeing Arkansas quarterback and what he did, I would agree with that too. I don't think they're putting up 44 like they did against South Dakota State. I think that's still going to be a more solid defense. I think they'll protect Bowman, but I think they will put more pressure than the Jackrabbits did. What'd you say, Marshall? 31-24?
I think so. I already forgot. That's how I do my predictions. Just whatever numbers pop in my head, and then hopefully they're somewhere in the 7. I use 7 and 3s to get there, but then I just let it rip. And
I know it's media days, and so I mentioned to Barry that he predicted OSU to win 10 games. He goes, "I did." And he said, "Good for them." Oh, Barry. But yeah, that would seem about right. I mean, the 9-point spread, like I mentioned earlier. Trying to decide it. I think that's a fine line. I think it'll be within 10 points for sure. I could see it being a 10-point game where, again, it's hard to think like I predict with South Dakota State. Ollie's just one of those guys where I think it could be you're sweating it most of the game, and then he just has some crazy run at the end. The defense gets a stop because the defense looked really good in the fourth quarter, and that was kind of their trend last year. They looked really good in the second half. So I could see the score looking worse than what it was the whole game.
Yeah, I definitely could too. I think we score a lot of points, though. I did not see us scoring 44 and leaving, in my mind, at least some points on the board here against South Dakota State. I just think there were a couple of touchdowns that could have happened that ended up being, one of the 3 field goals or something as well. And I do think we'll score a lot against Arkansas, but then again, it's hard for me to say I think we'll score a lot against Arkansas when, hey, they may have been playing against a real nobody on Thursday night, but they still didn't allow a point. So it's kind of hard for me to say speak out of both sides of my mouth here. But I'd be a little bit higher on the offense, which maybe from how many different playmakers I saw get some plays there. So I'll say 38. But at the same point, I don't think our defense is able to really stop them as well as we did this past Saturday. And I think they probably scored 28 or so. And hopefully my math kind of checks out there with the 3s and the 7s as well, kind of as you were saying, Marshall, because that can always trip me up here. I think that means that I'm saying, a bunch of touchdowns and a field goal and them only touchdowns. So I'll take it. If we win, we win. That's all I care about. But